This is a story of mystery, sacrifice. In this village stood a tree, unlike any other, one that bled blood once every year, and with every drop of blood, a virgin child died. No one knew why. No one dared to question it, except one brave girl named Adaobi. What she uncovered would shake the entire village, and what she did next would change their destiny forever. Don't skip a second. This is one story you will never forget. Once upon a time, in a village called Umueze, there stood a mysterious tree, unlike any other. This tree bled blood once every year, and whenever it did, a virgin would die in the land. Year after year, the people of Umueze lived in fear. No one knew which family would be the next victim. The bleeding of the tree became a dreadful tradition, something the villagers sadly got used to. It continued for many years, haunting their lives like a dark shadow. In that same village lived a young girl named Adaobi. She had lost her father a few years ago and now lived with her mother and her brother Uche. Adaobi often sat in silence, her mind troubled. She asked herself, how did that tree come into existence? Why does it bleed once a year? And why must a virgin girl or boy die whenever it bleeds? One day, unable to keep her thoughts to herself any longer, she turned to her mother. "Mother, I want to ask you something." "Go ahead, my daughter. Ask me anything. What is it?" her mother replied, looking at her with gentle eyes. "Mother, why does the evil tree bleed every once in a year? And why does a virgin always die whenever it bleeds?" Her mother sighed deeply and shook her head slowly. "I don't know, my daughter. That tree had been bleeding even before I married your father. Nobody truly knows how it came into existence. But mother, I am afraid I might be the next victim one day," said Adaobi, her voice trembling. "May the gods forbid. You can never be a victim of that evil tree, not my daughter," her mother replied firmly. "But mother," Adaobi continued, "where are the gods? Why can't they stop the tree from bleeding? Why can't they protect us and stop their innocent descendants from dying?" Her mother gasped and looked around fearfully. "Oh my God, this girl, you are talking too much. Please, I don't want any trouble. Stop speaking of the gods like that," she warned, whispering as though afraid someone or something might hear them. That night, Adaobi couldn't sleep. While her brother Uche slept peacefully beside her, she sat at the edge of the bed, staring with confusion. Her heart was heavy, her mind restless. How did the evil tree come into existence? Why does it kill the innocent? Why has no one done anything about it? The next morning, with a clay pot balanced on her head, Adaobi left the house to fetch water from the stream. The forest path was quiet, filled only with the chirping of birds and the sound of rustling leaves. On her way, she met an elderly woman, one of the villagers, walking slowly with a basket in her hand. "Good morning, Ma," Adaobi greeted politely. "Good morning, my daughter. How are you this morning?" the woman replied with a warm smile. "I'm fine, Ma. Please, I want to ask you something," Adaobi said, hesitating slightly. "Okay, I'm listening," the woman replied, curious. "Please, can you tell me how the evil tree came into existence in this village?" The woman paused. Her smile faded. She looked at Adaobi closely, then shook her head slowly. "My daughter, this question is too heavy for a little child like you, but I will tell you the truth. I don't know the mystery behind the evil tree. Since I was married into this village, the tree has always been there. I met it this way, bleeding and killing. No one knows its true story." Adaobi lowered her head, disappointed. She thanked the woman and continued on her way to the stream. Her mind was still full of questions, unanswered questions. As she walked, her thoughts echoed louder than her footsteps. Why won't anyone speak? Why does everyone fear this tree? Is there no one who knows the truth? The mystery was deep, but in her heart, Adobe felt a burning need to uncover the mystery, no matter the risk. When Adobe returned from the stream, her thoughts were even heavier. She sat outside, staring blankly into the distance. Since no one has an answer to my question, I must go to the king. He is the ruler of this land. Surely he must know the mystery behind the bleeding tree, she said to herself. Without telling anyone, she stood up with determination and began walking toward the king's palace. Upon her arrival, the palace guards looked at her with surprise. "Where do you think you are going, little girl?" one guard asked, trying to stop her. "You don't just walk into the palace demanding to see the king." But another guard, older and wiser, looked at Adobe closely and said, "Anything that made this child come here so boldly must be serious. Let's allow her to speak." He led her through the tall gates and into the palace. The king, a noble man with gray hair and wise eyes, sat on the throne. He looked up as Adobe entered. "Your Majesty," Adobe greeted respectfully, kneeling briefly. "How are you, my child?" the king asked kindly. "Come and sit down." Adobe sat quietly, then looked up at him. "Your Majesty, I have a question that has been troubling me deeply." "Go ahead and ask, my child," said the king. "With due respect, Your Majesty, what is the mystery behind the evil bleeding tree?" "I am just curious," she said softly. The king's smile faded. He sighed deeply and leaned back on his throne. After a long pause, he began to speak. "My child, I will tell you the truth behind the bleeding tree." He took another deep breath. "Many years ago in this land, we had a powerful chief priest. He was greatly feared. Every harvest season, he demanded that the villagers bring him gifts, food, crops, livestock. He claimed the gods had instructed him so. Our people, though reluctant, obeyed. After every harvest, they divided what they had gathered and gave a large portion to the chief priest. This went on for years. But one year, the people became tired. They had worked so hard on their farmlands only to hand over half of it to one man, so they refused to bring the offerings. To punish them and prove his power, the chief priest unleashed a dark force. The skies closed. The rains stopped. The crops withered in the farms. Hunger struck the land. Fear returned to the hearts of our people. They ran back to the chief priest for help, crying and begging. But the chief, full of deceit, told them that the gods were angry. He claimed that the only way to appease the gods was to sacrifice two virgins, a boy and a girl. The people believed him. They were desperate and afraid. And so, the chief priest chose two innocent children from among us. Their parents wept and begged, but he said it was the only way. The children cried bitterly. Their parents pleaded until their voices cracked, but the chief priest would not be moved. He said the gods demanded it. The king's voice grew heavier as he continued. The parents of the chosen children ran to the palace, pleading for mercy. My father was the king then, and I was only a small boy sitting beside my younger brother. But even my father, the ruler of the land, couldn't save them. He also believed the chief priest. The king paused, then wiped his face. And so, just like that, the innocent children were taken. They were sacrificed, their cries silenced forever. The villagers buried them together, side by side, in one grave, just as the chief priest instructed. And to mark their sacrifice, a tree was planted over their grave. He shook his head slowly. Then came the worst. A few months later, that planted tree began to grow, strong, tall, and strange. Then one morning, the chief priest was found dead along the village road, his body twisted unnaturally. And the following year, the tree bled for the first time. That same year, I lost my only brother. The land wept. The palace mourned. Adobe covered her mouth in shock. As if that wasn't enough, the king continued. The tree bled again the next year. Another innocent virgin died. Fear took over the village. Our people began to seek answers beyond our borders. They traveled far until they found a powerful seer. And through him, the truth was revealed. The spirits of the sacrificed children refused to rest. Their deaths were unjust, their spirits were angry, full of pain and vengeance, and they had cursed the tree to bleed once every year, claiming a virgin life as repayment. Adeobi's heart raced. "What is the solution, Your Majesty?" she asked. The king nodded solemnly. He looked at her, his voice now low. The worst part of the revelation was this: the only way to break the curse was that a virgin must willingly offer herself, or himself, for sacrifice. Not by force, it must be willingly. He paused. A virgin must volunteer to be taken by the tree. That is the only way to calm the angry spirits and stop the curse. He sighed heavily and wiped a tear. After my father died, I got married to my beautiful wife, and my wife bore me 3 children, 2 boys and 1 girl, but none of them crossed the age of 10. One after the other, the tree took them. The bleeding tree made me childless. My wife, the late queen, couldn't bear the loss. She died of heartbreak. Tears now flowed freely from the king's eyes. When Adaobi saw this, she too began to cry. "Your Majesty, I am so sorry for your loss," she said through her tears. Then she stood. "I have made my decision. I will volunteer myself to die for my people." Before the king could respond, Adaobi turned and ran out of the palace. She made her way home, where her mother and her brother rushed to her side. "What is it? Why are you crying?" they asked in panic. Breathing heavily, Adaobi said, "Mother, Uche, I know the mystery behind the bleeding tree. It was all a great tragedy, but there is only one way to stop the tree from bleeding and stop our people from dying." They stared at her in shock. "What is the mystery? What is the solution?" her mother asked. Adaobi sat them down and carefully narrated everything the king had told her. They listened in disbelief. Then she dropped the final words. "I have volunteered myself to save our people," Uche shouted. "No, sister, you will not die. I don't want to lose you," her mother gasped. "You cannot do such a thing. I will never allow you to sacrifice yourself." But Adaobi looked at them with calm courage. "Do you know if I will be the next victim of the bleeding tree? Or maybe Uche, my brother? I don't want to die in vain. If death must come, let it come through sacrifice, so that others can live." She stood up, wiped her tears, and walked back to the palace. The king, moved by her bravery, sent messages across the land. The elders gathered at the palace. The time had come. As the villagers assembled, Adobe stood before the evil tree. Before stepping closer, she turned to the king. "Your Majesty, promise me you will take care of my mother and my brother. Promise me they will never suffer." The king stepped forward, his voice trembling. "I promise I will care for them as my own. They will never suffer, this I declare." Adobe's mother and brother cried uncontrollably, their voices cracking from pain. The villagers stood in silence, tears in their eyes. Adobe stepped closer to the bleeding tree. She placed her hands gently on it and whispered, "Dear innocent souls, I am here to calm your angry spirits. Let there be peace in our land. No more sorrow, no more tears. Let there be no more untimely deaths. Take me and remain calm forever." Suddenly, a cold wind blew through the air, and in an instant, Adobe vanished. The ground was still. The tree stopped bleeding. Her mother and brother fell to the ground, wailing, and the entire village wept with them. But in their hearts, they knew Adobe had saved them all. The next morning, the king sent one of his guards to Adobe's home with a special message. When the guard arrived, he found Adobe's mother and her brother Uche sitting outside in silence. their faces stained with tears. Grief had made the house quiet, empty, and heavy. The guard stepped forward gently. "The king requests your presence at the palace." Without a word, they both stood up and followed him, their hearts still aching with sorrow. As they entered the palace courtyard, they saw the king seated on his throne, surrounded by the village elders. The king stood as they arrived and motioned for them to come closer. "Welcome. I know your pain is still fresh, but today I bring you news of comfort and honor," the king said warmly. They bowed respectfully, eyes lowered. The king smiled gently. "I have given your son Uche a full scholarship. He will go to school and study up to the university level. Everything will be paid for." Tears filled their eyes again, but this time it was from gratitude. They both knelt down, thanking the king over and over. But the king was not done. "Stand up. There is more. From today, this palace is your home. Go and bring only your clothes. You will live here under my care and protection." Gasps filled the hall. Adobe's mother and Uche were stunned. They looked at each other in disbelief, then back at the king, and knelt again in appreciation.
"Thank you, Your Majesty. May the gods bless you. May Adobe's spirit watch over you,"
her mother said, trembling. The elders nodded in agreement, smiling and murmuring in approval. The king raised his hand for silence. "That is not all," he said. Everyone became still. The king turned to them, and his voice grew firm and royal. "Your son, Uche, is now the heir to my throne. Whenever I join my ancestors, he shall be crowned king. This is my decision. I have spoken, and so shall it be." There was a stunned silence in the palace. Uche's mother covered her mouth in shock. Uche's eyes widened, unable to speak. Then, slowly, they both fell to their knees again, weeping and thanking the king endlessly.
"I don't know how to thank you, Your Majesty," she whispered.
The elders rose to their feet, clapping softly in honor of the king's great kindness and Adobe's unforgettable sacrifice. "Your daughter gave her life to save this land. We can never forget her," one elder said. "Through her sacrifice, a new dawn has come." And so peace returned to Umueze. The bleeding tree never bled again. No more virgins died. The curse was broken. The land was free, and Adobe's name was written in the hearts of all, forever remembered as the girl who gave everything to save her people. After leaving the palace that day, Adobe's mother and Uche returned to their home to pack their belongings. With only their clothes and memories, they made their way back to the palace. From that day on, the palace became their new home. They were cared for by palace maidens, protected by guards, and treated with the honor befitting the family of the girl who had saved the land. Though they still mourned Adobe deeply, they lived in peace and gratitude. Years passed. Uche was now in the university, studying under the full scholarship the king had provided. He worked hard, always remembering the sacrifice of his sister and the kindness of the king. But one afternoon, during a quiet moment on campus, his phone rang. It was his mother. Her voice was shaking. "Uche, the king is dead," she said, crying bitterly. Uche froze. "No, no, it can't be," he whispered. Tears streamed down his face as grief overtook him. He cried uncontrollably, mourning the man who had become like a father to him. A few weeks later, Uche returned to the village for the king's burial. The whole land mourned. The funeral was grand and sorrowful, honoring a great ruler who had brought peace back to Umueze. After the burial, the elders summoned Uche to a private meeting. "You are the heir to the throne," one elder said. "But the late king gave us a clear instruction before he died. He said we must allow you to finish your education before we crown you king." Uche nodded respectfully, with tears in his eyes. "I understand. I will honor his wishes," he replied. With the blessing of the elders, Uche returned to school, more determined than ever. He poured his heart into his studies, knowing the future of a kingdom awaited him. A few years later, Uche graduated from the university with honors. He took beautiful pictures with his mother, both smiling proudly, his graduation robes glowing in the sunlight, a symbol of triumph after years of sorrow. Then, not long after, the long-awaited day came. Uche was crowned the king of Umueze. The villagers gathered in their thousands to witness the historic moment. The same boy who once wept for his sister's death had now become the hope of the land. As he sat on the throne for the first time, his heart remembered Adaobi. He raised his voice and said, "This throne is not mine alone. It belongs to my sister, Adaobi, the true savior of Umueze. Her name will never be forgotten." And the crowd erupted in joy and tears. Not long after his coronation, King Uche began his reign with wisdom, humility, and compassion. The people of Umuezi rejoiced under his leadership. One bright morning, he gathered craftsmen and artists, and so, under his command, a statue of Adaobi was molded. A beautiful, lifelike image of Adaobi, standing tall with her hands on the bleeding tree, just as she had stood on the day she vanished. The day the statue was unveiled, the entire village came out in celebration and remembrance. Adaobi's mother stood beside the king, weeping quietly, her heart filled with pride and pain. And from that day forward, the village held an annual festival called the Day of Peace, to remember Adaobi's sacrifice and to celebrate the end of the curse. And the girl who once walked alone to seek the truth became the eternal guardian of Umueze.